Welcome, everyone. I'm hoping I'm not freezing. I saw the blue circle. Am I still with everybody? Okay, excellent. Um, I am grateful to have you all here today. My name is Phoebe Morad. I'm Director of Lutherans Restoring Creation and excited to be with you tonight. A lot of this is going to be handed over to Gabrielle, who has done an incredible job taking what we love as this incredible study guide. She has been able to put into an incredible form that hopefully we will now have as a recorded bundle for you all to be able to share with your congregations for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. It could keep going. But our hope is that we can help usher you to do this on your own and in your own time and in your own way. But before we start, and as people get settled, and as we hope you do, either as a congregation or adult Bible study or a youth group, we're going to start off with a land acknowledgement. Where we are right now, since we're all over the place, our land acknowledgement as Lutherans Restoring Creation has a little bit more to do with uh, acknowledging that we are all sharing knowledge, that we are not, there is not one knowledge base. But when you gather together, if you can really think about the people that were the first earth keepers where you are, we encourage you to do that. And Gabrielle, I'm just going to ask while I'm doing this, if you can make sure folks are muted, because I think I forgot to do that mute
Yep,
when
no
people enter
problem.
thing. Okay, thank you. Also, though, we do encourage you to, in the chat, share where you are zooming in from, what congregation, who the first people were and still are on your territory. And our acknowledgement is that as we live, work, and worship in the land that is now called the United States, Lutherans Restoring Creation recognizes that we do so on land that was stolen from Indigenous people. We are also called to restore creation as we are called to restore right relationship with one another. As we join in this holy vocation of loving our neighbor, we honor all our Indigenous siblings who have been companions of the lands, waters, and beings of this turtle island since time immemorial. We charge our community to learn about the original and continuous stewards of the land upon which we exist. We lament legacies of violence, cultural genocide, and displacement of Indigenous communities, committing ourselves to hearing and speaking the truth of that history and its ongoing effects. May we now gather faithfully in mind, body, and spirit, so that we may mend what has been broken and embody Christ's gospel of abundant life. And although I said this just before, I'm just going to also preface, because so many more people have joined us in the past few moments, that you are invited into this space that we hope will be a continuing education gift to those people in the future. And we are gathering together in an intimate space in this time, but we're going to ask you to think about all the questions that will be asked of you and jot them down, doodle them. So find a piece of paper, something to write with. When you're asked some of the questions as we go through this study guide, know that we want to talk in small breakout groups after, in about 30 minutes or so. But we're not going to pause now, so that folks at home, when you use this recording, can actually just pause and spend as long as they need on their own. But we don't want you to forget all those first questions. So write down whatever you need to remember your thoughts beforehand. Over to you, Gabrielle.
Thank you. Yes, the actual study guide does a great job of having lots of interplay between facilitator and group conversation that we won't quite get to capture in this virtual space unless you're using it later and have the ability to pause. But do keep taking notes, and we'll be able to get to that later. Yay!
And the other thing that I forgot to mention is that Gabrielle might call on you if you have your screen on to share in reading something. Otherwise, we'll ask you to stay on mute. But if your screen's on, know that you might be called on to help read something so you're not sick of our voices.
Yay. Okay, well, let's get right into it. So we are in our Kairos Moment, a study guide on the 2023 Earth Climate Crisis Social Statement. This is week 1, although we're doing it over a series of 4 months. So we're right at the beginning here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the structure of this study guide because there is a lot of ground to cover. And if you're not familiar with the structure of it, it might feel like we're kind of going between different ideas pretty quickly. In Earth's climate crisis, which was the social message, there are 4 expressions of justice highlighted: sufficiency, sustainability, solidarity, and participation. In addition to 4 expressions, there's also 3 types of justice: intra-generational, intergenerational, and intersectional. And I don't have time to go into what all of those mean. Please do read the social message. It's great. But there's also many topics discussed: weather versus climate, climate anxiety, theological understandings of dominion versus stewardship, climate migration, all of these things. And so to put this into a 4-week study guide is difficult. But the author of the study guide, Ryan Cumming, decided to group these into weeks. So we'll go over this over the next 4 sessions. But today we're over here on session 1, which is our story. We'll cover the interdependence of living things, the idea of sufficiency. Our topics will include stewardship versus dominion and weather versus climate. We'll use the example of the US Dust Bowl to explore a little deeper in those topics. In each session during the study guide, we'll have 7 segments. You can watch over on the sidebar where we are in the segment. But for now, let's get started on what is actually session 1, which is entitled Finding Our Place in Creation. We're going to begin with an opening prayer. The study guide has a great example of an opening prayer you can say together, but for our virtual setting today, we're going to use Psalm 104 from the LRC Earth Day service from last year. Is the audio okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh no, sorry.
I thought it was, and then it went away.
Sorry.
Not hearing any audio right now.
Okay, let me try.
All of the buttons.
All of the buttons. Oh boy.
At least there are words on this too.
Yes.
But Kristen has a really nice voice. And
And
while you're figuring that out too, I just put the download for the study guide. It looks like ELCA just updated their website, and it looks like a lot of the links to the climate message are wrong. So we will make sure we get you the right ones so you can use it too.
Okay, great. Once more, here we go.
At this beautiful and boundless universe, cultivated over eons with love and care. Your creative intent envelops the world like a cloak. I see it shining in the heavens. Hear it whispering in the winds. Feel it crackling in the fire. For you energize the dust of the universe. The galaxies, the stars, the planets, right down to this jewel of an earth. You are wrapped in light as with a garment. You stretch out the heavens like a tent. You make the clouds your chariot. You ride on the waves of the wind. You make the winds your messengers. Fire and flame your ministers. You paint the earth with your Holy Spirit. Each stroke and color with purpose, place, and song. You put a restlessness in our hearts that leave us to seek you always. Therefore, I will sing your songs all my days and care for all you have created and keep my heart ever open to your love.
Thank you. Hopefully that gave you a moment of respite. We won't spend too much time on this, but you may want to set the tone and the community norms of any study session or time you spend together. The Kairos Moment study guide says, we can agree on ends, but disagree on means. Well-intentioned people can disagree about what constitutes the better part of moral action. We must deliberate and collaborate together because we cannot solve the problem individually or as a single institution. Moral deliberation and action together are essential to our identity as a church. Keep that in mind as we go into breakout rooms or other places where we will deliberate together. All right, we're going to start with an opening activity, and there are 2 questions. They will continue to be displayed on the screen, but if you're here with us tonight, feel free to write these down in your journal, your answer to these, and if you join later on, feel free to pause and reflect. I'm going to show you a series of images from our wonderful planet Earth, our God's creation, and just want you to pay attention to what memories come up with that, and what your journey has been in God's creation. So there'll be about 10 of these. I'll pause briefly on each one. Just give yourself this moment to reflect. And I believe that that is the end of our images. Some of them might have resonated with you stronger than others. And some of them might have been unfamiliar or, yeah, more resonant with you. We'll look forward to hearing those stories later. And with that, we are going to move into our Bible study section, which of course is the, oops, I'm hearing an echo, sorry. We are going to move into the Bible study section. So hopefully you are familiar with the story of creation, but I'm going to call on somebody to read this for us. And I see, Jed, I see your camera on. Are you willing to read this for us?
Sure. You can hear me?
Great.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Genesis 1. Then God said, let us make humans in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created humans in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, God created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Then God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and keep it. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you, Jen. So again, write down these questions in your journal if you're here with us in person. 3 questions. What do you notice? How does God relate to creation? And what is the role of humanity in this story? Of course, if you're watching this later, feel free to pause and discuss this right away. We're going to move into an activity because you may have noticed 2 different types of language being used in those 2 excerpts. I'm going to read a statement from the climate crisis social message. Both the Creator's model of dominion in Genesis and the example of our Lord Jesus teach us to serve others rather than dominate and degrade them. Created from the earth's dust, human beings are given the responsibility to keep or care for the earth, just as God keeps and cares for us. The Hebrew word shamar, translated as keep, means to protect and sustain Earth's life for future generations. So one of the things you may have picked up on is both the language of dominion or subdue, and then keep and till, or in Hebrew, shamar. One thing we can do is, if you are having this social guide in person, is have this up on a whiteboard, and everybody can contribute some words or actions you associate with dominion or subduing versus keep and till. I'm guessing with us in this group tonight, you probably have a pretty good idea of the line between those 2 ideas. And I encourage you to also journal, put that in your journal.
And
so now,
sorry,
go ahead,
as
Phoebe.
you're, no, it's okay. I was just going to say, as we're thinking about, we have the audience here that's with us tonight that already knew about Lutherans Restoring Creation. Remember, when you're sharing this with your congregation, a lot of people have never thought about the intersection of faith and environmentalism at all, or might not even agree that it should be talked about. So again, remembering that the group we have gathered here today is very different. And I always have to remind myself that I get to do this for a living and think about it all the time. In the meantime, there are people that, if this is a new concept, it could take a lot longer, than if this is something that you've talked about all the time. So just remembering and being gentle with everyone in the room, recognizing that, you might be at X, Y, and Z, but most people might still be at A, B, and C. So really taking your time through this. And there are lots of other questions that you'll find in the printout version. We've, distilled that here. Thanks, Gabrielle. But yeah, just recognize that you might need all those questions. You might need to make this into an 8-10 week study, what we've found.
Yes, thank you. That's really important. And if you have this up on a whiteboard and you're able to generate some great conversation about that, I also encourage you to think about adding a third column with the example of Jesus. Which set of dominion versus dominion and subduing versus keeping and tilling, and which is closer to the model of leadership that Jesus sets for us? I'm guessing when you think about the leading that the servant leadership that Jesus will do, that Jesus did, that you will come up with the fact that his ministry showed much more of a shamar take. So now we are going to I'm going to pass it back to you, Phoebe, to talk a little bit about the social message. We talked about the Bible and the biblical grounding for this, and now we're going to talk about the social message.
Sure. And I just also want to encourage you all to just thank and pray for the people that have taken the time to take our theological foundation and also write that in the message itself, but then also take it and put it into a study guide. And I also thank Gabrielle for taking what was a very full palette of work and distilling it even further. But this was put together by a lot of great minds, and I really appreciate all of the questions. So keep going back to it is what I'm trying to say. In the Earth Climate Crisis social message, in fact, I will ask someone else to speak if they could be on screen to read this part. And I happen to see Cindy is right there in front of me. Cindy Gross, would you be able to read this excerpt from the climate crisis?
Sure.
Thanks.
God creates human beings as interdependent with the whole creation and grants humans special responsibility as innovative stewards to contribute to the flourishing of creation. It is in this sense that the human species is created in the image of God. The Imago Dei is the human vocation, our calling, to participate in what God is already doing for the earth, respecting and promoting the flourishing of creation.
Thank you, Cindy. So there are a lot of incredible links to kind of multimedia that is offered in this guide. The one that we're going to share with you is about the Dust Bowl. And it's a little antiquated, but I think it's really great because it's pretty timeless. So as you watch this, think about these questions. They'll be put up again for you. What stood out in the video? Where do you see interdependence between humans and creation? And where do you see themes of dominion versus stewardship? Go ahead, Gabrielle. Thank you.
The Dust Bowl was a severe period of drought and dust storms throughout the 1930s. Why did the Dust Bowl happen? How severe was the damage? The earliest explorers to the Great Plains region of North America determined that the area was unsuitable for agriculture. The territory even became known as the Great American Desert because the lack of trees and water made the region relatively unattractive for settlement. However, in the decades following the Civil War, farmers began to settle the region and cultivate the fields under the long-held but mistaken belief that rain will follow the plow. In the first 3 decades of the 1900s, there were significant and continuous advances in farming technology, including better tractors, mechanized plowing, combines, and more. From 1900 to 1920, the amount of farmland in the Plains region doubled, and from 1925 to 1930, the amount of cultivated land tripled. However, farmers of the era used practices which deprived the soil of its nutrients and increased the possibility of erosion. The heavy plowing had eliminated the natural grasses of the prairie that held the soil in place and maintained moisture. Then, in 1930, a severe drought struck the Great Plains region, which lasted nearly the entire decade. The regions affected most by this drought were the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma, western Kansas, and a large portion of Colorado and New Mexico. The more than 1 million acres that was affected became collectively known as the Dust Bowl. As the drought grew worse, the topsoil turned to dust and blew away. The blowing dust generated enormous dust storms that reached as far east as Washington, D.C. The dust storms became known as black blizzards. During the decade of the 1930s, the Dust Bowl region received anywhere from 15 to 25% less precipitation than normal. For a region that only sees about 20 inches of rain a year, this means that some areas were receiving as little as 15 inches of rain in 1 year. In some years, even less than that. As the decade wore on, and the severity of the Dust Bowl increased, efforts were made to correct the conditions. The Civilian Conservation Corps planted more than 200 million trees from Texas to Canada in an attempt to block the wind and hold the soil in place. Farmers were also instructed in soil conservation techniques such as crop rotation, contour plowing, and terracing. In some cases, the government even paid farmers $1 an acre to practice one of these conservation techniques. By the end of the 1930s, they had succeeded in reducing the amount of blowing dust by 65%. By the time rainfall returned to normal levels, nearly 75% of the topsoil had been blown away in some areas. It would be years before the region recovered completely.
Oh, so we'll talk about this piece later, or you can pause now if you're meeting in person. So yeah, these are the questions. But from page 3 of the Earth's Climate Crisis, I will, just because we're kind of running out of time, I'll just go, wait, where'd it go? Here we go. Viewed from space, Earth's atmosphere appears as a very thin and iridescent blue line around the circumference of the planet. Over billions of years, this miraculous shield has fostered a wondrous explosion of life on the land, in the sea, and in the air, while also protecting life from dangerous forms of solar radiation. And then if someone else wants to speak, let's see, Robert, I see you there. Would you be able to speak? Robert Lehrer? Oh, here we go. Okay, you don't know how to ask to unmute. I'll do Wendy then, if that's okay with you. Go ahead, Wendy.
The combustion of fossil fuels has powered most of the global economy for over 200 years and has permitted remarkable advances in food production, medicine, transportation, and consumer goods. Today's crisis is that the concentration of carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere is now higher than at any other time in the last 3.6 million years. Not only are current global emissions of carbon dioxide increasing, but the rate of emission is also accelerating. The same is true for methane and nitrous oxide emissions.
Thank you. And I will get another voice if that's okay. Francis, are you able to unmute? I can hit, nope, I guess not. Oh, there you go. There you are.
I can unmute.
Oh, Francis got it. Go ahead, Francis.
Francis, okay.
Thank you.
A sign of hope, however, is found in the decline of certain gases used in refrigeration. Because of regulations that were imposed after the U.S. signed the Montreal Protocol to protect Earth's ozone layer, the increasing concentrations of these greenhouse gases cause Earth to retain more and more heat from the sun, which has led to an increase in global warming and related climate change. Earth's global surface temperature has increased by around 1.9 degrees Fahrenheit, 1.1 degrees Celsius since 1850.
Thank you, Francis. So this is something that you can certainly dive into a lot further depending on the group that you're with. With our particular group, we won't because we feel that you might already have had this conversation, but the difference between climate change and weather. Climate is what we expect and weather is what we get. And there are a lot of great resources that you can dig into to really flesh out this conversation. But right now we'll move on to a little bit more of the conversation as to what happens next. As Gabrielle had told us before, a lot of these studies are, okay, we're going to pray and think, and what are we going to do? We're going to plan. We're especially going to plan what our next most faithful step is. And as a group, we certainly want to talk to each other in a few moments about what we intend to do. But especially if this is the first time that anyone's thought about it in a group that you might meet with, it's nice to have some very tactile ideas. And what's beautiful about the guide is you can even print these out and cut them out so that people can even just grab one and maybe even put it up on a cork board in public and everything, or take it with them so they remember what they're going to do. So we're just kind of showing them on the screen here. These are make one change ideas with some very particular ideas related to what we were just reading about. And I love that a lot of them involve praying, like that is doing something, especially if we can do it together. So the making one change topic comes up in all of these sessions. And just to kind of highlight the fact that that is what Lutherans Restoring Creation has always been asking all of you to do. As a group, we have Actions Speak Loudly that ask you to also think about, as a green team, what are you going to do? What have you been doing? Let's celebrate what you do. And what can we ask our friends to do next? So thank you for sharing this, Gabrielle. And I think I'm going to hand it back over to you before we go into breakouts.
Yeah, I just want to hop in and say that, of course, adapt to your group.
Yes.
Some of these are really well suited for families and for kids, and some of these are adapted for all different like entry levels on the issue of climate change. And there are also, of course, blank cards. I did not include them because I don't feel the need to. That said, make your own action, which may be the most helpful thing. Some of these things might not be the action you want to take.
And
yes.
You're right. I did mean to mention as well that I'm putting in the chat here, knowing your audience. Also, if you're doing this online, if you're going to do it on Zoom, we also have some good quick links to some action plans, so we have the Action Speak Loudly on our website page on Lutherans Restoring Creation for a whole team to think of what they can do next. But for individuals, what we shared at Youth Gathering is in the chat, as well as some really good individual ideas that link straight to some of those next steps that Gabrielle also made as well.
Yeah. As you may have seen in the sidebar, the last thing you will do with the study group is a closing prayer. The study guide has some great resources and some out of the ELW, I believe they have some prayers. But we will do that in our own breakout rooms at the end of our call tonight. Of course, if you're coming to this later, pause and do that now. The main question that will send you out into breakout rooms is, what is the role we play in God's ongoing care of creation? That's a huge one. There are so many different directions you can go. Feel free to share anything that you covered in your journal, anything that you're thinking about. I'll put that in the chat as well.
I guess I should unmute as well if I want to speak. I just wanted to thank you all for being here together in one big space. And as we go out, I also just want to thank those people, and we can wave to them if you're on screen, but thank everybody in the future who's going to be doing this. And it feels kind of weird, but prayers to you all for doing this and taking this forward and taking it, a very specific next step as a group, especially with people that don't typically think about this. So thank you all. And with that, I will stop recording.